There is a version of the 2026 World Cup that most fans never see, and it has almost nothing to do with penalty kicks. It is a version built on $9 hot dogs, $300,000 tickets, immigration raids parked outside stadium gates, and a soccer federation that keeps insisting everything is going exactly according to plan. Somewhere in the middle of all that noise, one of the most decorated national teams on the planet walked off the field in shame, and the reason why says more about politics than it does about soccer. For almost 100 years, the World Cup never had a round like the one we are watching right now. This tournament introduced something brand new called the Round of 32, a stage that did not exist in Qatar, did not exist in Russia, and did not exist in any World Cup before that. In just 6 days, 48 national teams were trimmed down to 32, and somewhere inside that 6-day window, one of soccer's biggest superpowers suffered a collapse so painful that its own newspapers refused to soften the blow. We are talking about a 4-time world champion, a team that almost never loses this early, and a locker room that is still trying to explain what happened. Stick around because we are going to walk through exactly how that happened, why the tournament's new format is getting blamed for it, and why so much of this World Cup right now is really a story about money, borders, and power dressed up as a soccer tournament. Let's start with the price tag, because this tournament has already earned an unofficial title nobody at FIFA wanted, the most expensive World Cup in history. At the stadium in Houston, a plain burger and fries can run close to $24. Up in Toronto, a single hot dog costs around 11 Canadian dollars, and a soda is nearly as expensive as the hot dog itself. Atlanta is the rare exception, only because the stadium's ownership group flatly refused to let FIFA push prices higher, which is exactly why a hot dog and a beer there still costs about $10. A fact that has become its own news story inside the United States. FIFA President Gianni Infantino does not seem to understand why any of this makes people angry. When reporters asked him about final tickets reselling for as much as $30,000 on secondary markets, he laughed and said that if someone actually pays that much, he would personally bring them a hot dog and a Coca-Cola. Fans did not find that funny. To a lot of ordinary supporters, that joke confirmed what they already suspected, that this World Cup was built for corporate boxes and wealthy travelers, not for the working-class fan who used to be able to save up and just show up. The numbers back up that frustration. FIFA itself admitted that it received roughly 500 million ticket requests before sales even opened, compared to only about 50 million requests for Russia 2018 and Qatar 2022 combined. That explosion in demand became the excuse for premium final seats to jump from a little over $10,000 to nearly $33,000 in only a few months. Meanwhile, sportsbooks are thriving. Every upset, every penalty shootout, every underdog run pumps more money through betting platforms, and no matter who lifts the trophy at the end, there is one business that always wins, and it is rarely the sport itself. Now here's where the politics get uncomfortable. For thousands of Mexican and Latin American fans living in the United States without legal documentation, this World Cup is not something they experience inside a stadium. It is something they watch through a phone screen or a television from the safety of their own living room. Civil rights organizations have documented more than 15 cases of people being detained by federal immigration agents near cities that are hosting World Cup matches, and human rights researchers say the real number of enforcement actions around these host cities over the past year runs into the tens of thousands. According to Human Rights Watch, immigration agents made more than 92,000 arrests in and around the 11 United States host cities between January and October of last year alone, months before the opening match was even played. More than 120 immigrant rights organizations have since mobilized across host cities, publicly warning the roughly 10 million expected visitors that, in their words, serious rights violations are already happening on the ground. One widely reported case involved an asylum seeker who brought his two children, ages 10 and 14, to watch a match at the stadium in New Jersey last year, only to be detained by police and handed over to immigration officers while his kids watched. A handful of lawmakers in Congress introduced legislation that would have banned immigration operations within roughly a mile of World Cup stadiums, but that bill has not passed. One congressman publicly asked how the country can host the world's biggest sporting event while simultaneously deporting fans who traveled to watch it. A Mexican immigrant who has lived in Los Angeles for 25 years put it simply to a Wire reporter. Walking into the stadium is a feeling like nothing else, but he would rather watch from his couch than risk being taken away from his son in front of everyone. That is the version of this World Cup that a huge share of the Latino fan base is actually living through right now, even as the tournament sells itself as a celebration that belongs to everyone. So now let's get into the actual headline story, because this week, the 2026 World Cup crossed a line it had never crossed before in its history. For the first time ever, this tournament has a genuine round of 32. Why did that never happen before? Because every World Cup through Qatar in 2022 was played with 32 total teams. There were no 3-team groups, and the group stage always fed directly into the round of 16. There was no extra layer in between. FIFA changed all of that by expanding the field to 48 national teams, splitting them into 12 groups of 4, and setting the rule that the top 2 finishers in every group would advance, along with the 8 best third-place teams. That system produced 32 qualified nations, funneling into a brand new round squeezed between the group stage and the round of 16. The total number of matches jumped from 64 all the way to 104. And any team that makes it to the final now has to play 8 matches total, one more game than any previous champion ever had to play. This new round kicked off on Sunday, June 28th, and runs through Friday, July 3rd, with all 16 matches split across stadiums in the United States, Mexico, and Canada. The idea to expand the tournament was not some sudden decision. It was first floated back in 2013. By then, UEFA President Michel Platini and Gianni Infantino picked the idea back up in 2016, shortly after becoming FIFA president. The critics back then were saying exactly what critics are still saying today, that there were already too many matches, that quality would get watered down, and that the whole idea was driven more by money and political maneuvering than by any real desire to improve the sport. And yet, the plan moved forward anyway. In terms of attendance, the experiment is clearly working. By late June, total attendance for this tournament had already crossed 3,600,000 fans, breaking the record the United States has held since hosting the World Cup back in 1994. But even before the very first ball was kicked, this expanded format was already causing friction among coaches, journalists, and fans around the world. Portuguese coach Carlos Queiroz, who leads Ghana's national team, was one of the most outspoken critics. He said that letting this many national teams qualify risks turning the World Cup into something vulgar and ordinary, and he openly questioned whether qualifying still means anything when so many teams get the chance to do it. He went as far as saying that in South America today, the real accomplishment would be failing to qualify, a comment that went viral among people who feel the tournament has lost its exclusivity. Marcelo Bielsa, the veteran Argentine coach who led Uruguay into this World Cup, jumped into the same debate weeks before the tournament even started. Bielsa said bluntly that all this talk about 48 teams amounts to theories that only get tested once they hit the real field, and he warned that if teams do not get enough rest and preparation time, the actual soccer suffers. The irony is that Bielsa himself became a victim of the very format he criticized. His Uruguay squad got eliminated in the group stage, something that would have stung under the old system too, but it felt even more bitter this time because most teams of similar quality managed to survive into the new round of 32. And that brings us to the story that generated more noise this week than anything else in the tournament. Germany, a four-time world champion and one of the most respected programs in World Cup history, was eliminated on penalty kicks by Paraguay right in this new round of 32. Germany went into that match as the clear favorite. Kai Havertz equalized in the second half after Julio Enciso had given Paraguay the lead, and the match went all the way through extra time still level. During extra time, Germany actually thought they had scored the winner off a corner kick header, but after a video review, the referee ruled the goal out for a foul on Paraguay's goalkeeper during the setup. Paraguay held their nerve in the shootout, winning 4-3, with Havertz, Jonathan Tah, and Nick Woltemar all missing crucial penalties for Germany. It marked the very first time in World Cup history that Germany had ever lost a penalty shootout. German newspapers did not go easy on their own team. One of the country's leading sports papers ran a headline saying the national team was drowning in its own embarrassment and pointed out that Germany has now failed to get past the early rounds in 3 World Cups in a row, something that had not happened since before their championship run in Brazil back in 2014. Head coach Julian Nagelsmann, only 38 years old and the youngest coach to lead a team into a World Cup knockout match in 40 years, admitted afterward that his squad is simply no longer a first-class soccer nation, calling the defeat almost impossible to put into words. Reports out of Germany are already floating names like Jurgen Klopp as a possible successor if Nagelsmann does not survive the fallout. For Paraguay, the celebration could not have been more different. Head coach Gustavo Alfaro called it the greatest victory of his career, praising his players as legends who fought as if their lives depended on it. Thousands of fans poured into the streets of Asunción to celebrate, and Paraguay's president declared the following day a national public holiday in honor of the team, an official government response to a soccer result, which tells you everything about how deeply this sport is tied to national identity and politics in South America. Paraguay had not reached the round of 16 since 2010, and now they move on to face the winner of France against Sweden. The most interesting part of Germany's collapse is that it confirms exactly what critics of the new format were warning about from the start. Because there is now an extra round squeezed in before the traditional round of 16, losing in the round of 32 is essentially the same emotional gut punch that used to come from losing in the group stage back when the tournament only had 32 total teams. On paper, Germany technically advanced further than teams used to under the old system. In reality, their tournament ended at the exact same emotional low point it always has, out early, with the press demanding explanations and the federation scrambling to defend its coach. Germany was not the only shock of this round. Japan was eliminated after Brazil came back to win 2 goals, 2-1 in the closing minutes, a result that stunned fans who thought Japan had the match under control. And the very first match of the entire new round between South Africa and Canada ended up being exactly the kind of game that critics of expansion had been dreading. Canada won on a goal scored deep into stoppage time, but outlets like CNN described the match as flat with almost no clear scoring chances and neither team playing at a level sharp enough to excite a neutral audience. For anyone arguing that 48 teams dilute quality, that match became exhibit number 1 in their case. To be fair, though, not everything about this expanded format has been bad. Public radio network NPR noted that the biggest fear heading into this tournament was that the traditional powerhouse nations would sail through the group stage with zero real danger. And that fear largely came true. The highest-ranked team eliminated before the round of 32 was Uruguay, sitting at number 16 in the world rankings. Compare that to Qatar 2022, when far higher-ranked programs like Belgium, Denmark, and Germany all got knocked out in the group stage. That means the real danger this time got pushed forward into this brand new round, which is exactly why Germany's exit against Paraguay hit so hard and why fans are now watching the round of 32 the way they used to watch the group stage finale. There have been genuine feel-good stories mixed into all this chaos, too. Canada and South Africa both played their first ever World Cup knockout match in their national histories, something that simply would not exist without this expansion. And Cape Verde, making their first ever World Cup appearance as a nation, managed to fight into the final 32 teams on the planet, one of the most heartwarming underdog stories of the entire tournament. This same stretch of matches also includes some genuine heavyweight showdowns that feel like finals played way too early, Netherlands against Morocco being one obvious example. Two teams that have reached semifinals or finals of major tournaments recently, and Argentina against Cape Verde, where Argentina is the obvious favorite, but where nobody is foolish enough to completely dismiss a debut nation that has already surprised everyone just by getting this far. Now let's talk about the matchup that matters most to this audience, because Mexico has been sitting right at the center of this entire debate about whether the new format helps or hurts the sport. Under head coach Javier Aguirre, Mexico finished a perfect group stage, winning all 3 matches in Group A without allowing a single goal the entire way through. That result let Mexico completely sidestep the chaos of the third-place team scramble and walk straight into the round of 32 as the top seed in their bracket. Their opponent was Ecuador, a team that had lived through the exact opposite kind of group stage, tying Curaçao, losing narrowly to Ivory Coast, and needing a win over Germany in their final group match just to survive. Ecuador actually pulled it off, beating Germany 2-1. A result Ecuadorian media called a historic statement win, since it marked the first time Ecuador had ever beaten a reigning world champion in a FIFA tournament. The Mexico versus Ecuador match kicked off on Tuesday, June 30th, at Estadio Azteca in Mexico City, and it turned into exactly the kind of statement performance the home fans had been hoping for. Mexico controlled the game from the opening minutes. Julian Quiñones scored and set up a second goal, and Raúl Jiménez added a finish of his own, giving Mexico a 2-0 lead they never gave up. Goalkeeper Raúl Rangel made the saves he needed to make, and Mexico completed their 4th consecutive clean sheet of the tournament. For a team that had not won a single World Cup knockout match since 1986, also on home soil, this win carried enormous emotional weight. 40 years of heartbreak in elimination matches finally came to an end in front of a roaring home crowd. Ecuador, physically drained after playing much of the tournament and now facing a match at more than 7,000 feet of altitude in Mexico City, simply could not find an answer. Their request to arrive earlier in the city to acclimatize to the altitude had reportedly been denied, and it showed on the field. Mexico advances into the round of 16 to face the winner of England against the Democratic Republic of the Congo, with that match also scheduled for Estadio Azteca. This was only the second time these two nations had ever met at a World Cup. The first meeting came at the 2002 tournament in Korea and Japan, when Mexico overcame an early Ecuador goal to win 2-1. This time the stakes were even higher, and Mexico delivered the result their fans had been waiting 4 decades to see. So back to the real question running through this entire tournament. Did the round of 32 drain the excitement out of the 2026 World Cup, or did it inject exactly the kind of drama the sport needed? The honest answer is that it is not a simple yes or no. On one side, you have matches like South Africa against Canada, confirming every fear the purists had: more teams, more forgettable matches, watered-down quality. On the other side, you have a 4-time world champion getting eliminated on penalties by a team that barely squeaked in as a third-place qualifier. Exactly the kind of chaos the old 32-team format almost never produced with this much frequency. What does seem clear is that this new round shifted the real danger zone away from the group stage and into the round of 32 itself. And that shift completely changed how big programs like Germany and hopeful hosts like Mexico are experiencing this tournament. The debate over whether 48 teams help or hurt the spectacle is not going away anytime soon. It will likely stay open all the way until the trophy gets lifted on July 19th at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, the very same stadium where immigration enforcement concerns first made national headlines months before this tournament even began. It is worth pointing out just how tangled the politics and the soccer have become in this tournament. Immigration enforcement, stadium food pricing, ticket scalping controversies, and a format overhaul all landed in the same 6-month window, and fans on social media have started treating those storylines as seriously as the actual results on the field. Some commentators argue that FIFA leadership, especially Infantino, has leaned into the commercial side of the tournament so heavily that the sport itself sometimes feels like an afterthought squeezed between sponsorship activations and premium hospitality packages. Others push back on that framing, pointing to record-breaking attendance numbers and insisting that the expanded format has actually given more nations, more fans, and more communities a genuine stake in the World Cup than ever before. There is also a quieter storyline building around host city relationships with federal authorities. Several city governments in tournament host regions have reportedly pushed back against enforcement operations near fan zones and transit hubs, worried about both the humanitarian impact and the economic hit if international visitors feel unsafe attending matches. Whether that pressure translates into any lasting policy change likely will not be clear until well after the final whistle blows in New Jersey, but it is already shaping how this World Cup is remembered outside the scoreline.